All right, so this is still 0.2. It is day 2. The directions are telling us to simplify and to leave all answers with positive exponents. Okay, so we are going to apply all of those rules that we talked about yesterday. And we are going to start with that first question, if you can get that written down. Again, we're going to just simplify, and we're going to leave all of our answers with positive exponents. So whenever we're asked to simplify and we've got some fractions going on, the very first thing I always look for is, do I have any parentheses that I need to get rid of with exponents on the outside of first? Are there any parentheses in this problem at all? No. Okay. Then what I do next is, once I get rid of all of the parentheses with exponents, then I look for negative exponents, and I move everything that has a negative exponent. Do I have any negative exponents in this first question? Negative exponents? No. I have negative numbers, but not negative exponents. So that means there's nothing that I need to move. Once I have that, and then I just look at simplify. So we're going to take this piece by piece. My numerator is negative 16x to the 4th, y to the 3rd. My denominator is 4x, y to the 7th. So we are going to start with the numbers first. So just looking at negative 16 and 4, I want to know what is it that they have in common that I can simplify out. What can divide into both negative 16 and 4? 4. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Is we're going to start by dividing each one of those by 4, which gives me a negative 4 at the top and 1 at the bottom. So far, so good? Now, yesterday we learned a rule about when we are dividing with the same base that we keep the base and we subtract our exponents. However, I found that gets a little complicated when we're dealing with these fractions. So this is kind of how I think about it. We're still technically subtracting, but we're doing it mostly in our head. What I want to ask you first is, how many x's do we have in the top part of our fraction? We have 4. X to the 4th means 4 x's, right? Okay. How many x's do I have in the bottom part of my fraction? Okay, so this is my question. Where do I have more x's? Or do I have more at the top or more at the bottom? At the top. That means any leftovers, all my extra x's are going to stay at the top. Well, how many extras do I have up there? 3, right? So that means I'm going to put x to the 3rd at the top. Wherever I have more of them, that's where they stay. How many more do I have? Okay, so how many, do you see how many we have at the top in the beginning? We have 4 of them, right? So like x times x times x times x. And then how many do we have in the bottom? Just 1, right? Oh, no, it just goes with x. Okay, so that means there's only 3 left once I get rid of those. I am. And I leave them wherever the more of them are. If the more are at the top, I leave them at the top. If the extras at the bottom, I leave them at the bottom. I'd leave them there at the bottom. Okay. All right, let's look at the y's now. How many y's do I have in the top part of my fraction? 3. How many do I have in the bottom? 7. So where do I have more, in the top or the bottom? Okay, so my extra y's are going to stay in the bottom of my fraction. How many extra are down there? 4. So I can leave my answer like that, or I could also just write it without that 1 in front of the y to the 4th. Either way, it's the same answer. Okay, so technically I am subtracting my exponents, but if we subtract it, then we get negatives, and it's just easier to think about, where do I have more of them, leave the extras in that position, and then think, how many more do you have? Does that make a little bit of sense? Kind of, sort of, maybe. All right, try number 2 then. needs to separate. Remember, the questions we're going to ask is, do we have any parentheses we need to get rid of? With exponents. Then do we have any negative exponents that we need to move? Question, what can 25 and negative 5 divide by? 5, okay. So 25 divided by 5 is 5. Negative 5 divided by 5 is negative 1. Yeah, okay. How many x's do I have at the top? How many do I have at the bottom? Where do I have the most? How many more? 2. Okay, so those 2 x's are going to stay at the bottom. And then what about the y's? Where do I have the most, at the top or the bottom? How many more? We can leave our answer like that. Here's the thing. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways. It's technically not proper to leave a negative in the bottom of a fraction. However, I'm not going to be that strict on it, okay? Because we're not going to be math superstars when we leave here and go be a mathematician for our career. So it really isn't that big of a deal. However, there's a couple of different ways we could write it. We could write this answer with our negative up at the top with the 5. Okay, and you also don't have to put the 1 in front of that x squared. Or you could write your negative in line with your fraction bar. Again, or you could leave it at the bottom like we did in the original answer. Okay? So as long as you have a negative somewhere, it doesn't really matter where it is, as long as it's in the answer. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. Take a minute and write down 3. We're going to talk through this one together, and then I'll give you a couple to try. So we're going to talk about the negative exponents again now. Okay, first question. Do I have any parentheses that I need to get rid of first? Second question. Do I have anything that has negative exponents? Yes. Okay, so I want to deal with that first. Okay, let's go through this slowly. Starting at the top. Does that x to the third have a negative exponent and need to be moved to the bottom? No, so it's going to stay at the top, so I'm going to go ahead and write it there at the top. Okay. Again, I'm only moving things that have negative exponents attached to them. What about in the numerator, the y to the fourth? Does that have a negative exponent? No, so it's going to stay at the top as well. So far, so good? All right, now looking at the denominator. I have an x to the negative 2. Does that need to move? Is its exponent negative? Yes. We cannot leave negative exponents in our answer. So if my negative exponent is in the denominator, to make that exponent turn positive, I move it to the top part. Okay, so I'm just going to put it, we're multiplying it by whatever we already have up here. So I'm putting it up at the top. And then if I look at that y to the negative third, does that one need to move? Is its exponent negative? It is. So it also needs to come to the top, and it becomes positive as well. If there's nothing left at the bottom, what would I just put? A 1. Okay. Now, does that look like it's completely simplified there? No, I got a couple of x's that I can combine. I got a couple of y's I can combine. So let's start with the x's. If I have x to the third times x to the squared, that gives me x to the fifth, right? We keep the base, we add the exponents. Then I'm going to do the same thing to the y's. If I have y to the 4th times y to the 3rd, I end up with y to the 7th. I can put it over 1 if I want to, or I can also just write it as x to the 5th, y to the 7th. The only things that need to move are the things that have negative exponents. Not negative signs in front of them, but negative exponents. Is everybody okay with that one? I'm coming. You're good. Huh? Okay, I'm going to do that. And that is raised to the negative 3 power. Yesterday we talked about that if we had a fraction in parentheses with an exponent on the outside, that exponent goes where? To both, right? The exponent on the 2 is a 1. The exponent on the 3 is the 1. We multiply. So what that does is it gives me 2 to the negative 3rd over 3 to the negative 3rd, correct? Now, if both my numerator and my denominator have negative exponents, to get rid of those, I'm just basically going to do what? Split them, yeah. The 3 to the 3rd is going to go to the top. The 2 to the 3rd is going to go to the bottom. And then I just need to figure out what they are. What is 3 to the 3rd power? 27. And what is 2 to the 3rd power? 8. You would try to simplify, okay? Here's the one issue that I see. People say, well, they're both cubes, so I can change it back to 3 over 2. No, you can't, because that wouldn't be dividing by the same thing. There is no number that goes into both 27 and 8, so we cannot simplify that, and we would leave our answer just like that. From there to turn it into the drop. I wouldn't count it for but so if you wouldn't count nothing else. All right, now number 5. Do you notice how I have parentheses and I have that exponent on the outside of the parentheses? Yes? Okay. The first thing I need to do is I need to get rid of the parenthesis, which means this exponent on the outside is going to be multiplied by every exponent on the inside for every piece, including the 4. So that becomes 4 to the negative 2. Then it becomes a to the what power? What's, and then b to the 4th, okay? Because negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Does everybody understand that part so far? Now what I need to do is I need to rewrite this without negative exponents. That means anything that has a negative exponent attached to it is going to move. Okay, starting with that 4. Does that 4 have a negative exponent on it? So it's going to move where? To the bottom, and it becomes 4 to the positive 2. What about the a? Does that have a negative exponent on it? Okay, so it's also going to move where? To the bottom, and that becomes a to the positive 6. What about that b? Does it need to move? No, so it is going to stay at the top. The only thing I ask is don't leave it as 4 squared. Write out what 4 squared is. What is 4 squared? 16. And then the last thing I would check is, do I have anything that can reduce? Anything that's the same at the top and the bottom? No, I don't. So I would leave my answer just like that. B to the 4th over 16a to the 6th. Yep, because their exponents were negative. Exactly. Yes, negative times negative is positive. Is everybody okay with that one? Somewhat? Okay. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Are we doing that with every positive? Every exponent has a negative, flip positive. Flip around.
Yes. If it has a negative exponent, it's going to move. So if it's in the top and its exponent's negative, it goes to the bottom. If it's in the bottom with an exponent that's negative, it goes to the top. Yes. All right. I would like for you to try number 6. All right. We should be working on number 6. First things first, you want to get rid of your parenthesis by giving the exponent that's on the outside of it to everything on the inside. And remember, when you have a power to a power, you're multiplying your exponents. Same thing in the bottom. Huh? So the difference is this. When we add, it's because I'm multiplying x squared times x to the third. That's when we add. But when I have x squared and I'm raising it to another power, that's when you multiply. See the difference? Okay. Is everybody okay with what I got so far? We're going to do those exponents. All right, let's start with the top. Well, before I do that, do I have negative exponents here? Yeah. Yes, I do. So before I start trying to simplify, I want to move those first. Starting at the top of my thing. Does my x to the 4th at the top have a negative exponent? No, so it's going to stay where it is. What else has a positive exponent and should stay where it is right now? The x to the 3rd that's at the bottom, correct? Okay. If you will notice, this y to the negative 6 at the top is going to have to move where? To the bottom, right, to make it turn positive? And then what about this y to the negative 12 that's at the bottom? Where is it going to have to go? It's going to have to go to the top. Okay. So when I move, I only move the things that have negative exponents. Both of the x's had positive exponents, so they stayed where they were. I switched my y's because they were both negative exponents. And once I get rid of all of my negative exponents, then I can worry about simplifying. Everybody ready? Mm-hmm. Where do I have more x's, at the top or at the bottom? How many more? 1, okay. Where do I have more y's, at the top or at the bottom? How many more at the top? 6. If there's nothing at the bottom, what do I put? A 1. So you can leave your answer like that, or we could also just write it as what? xy to the 6th. Maybe if I can write. Kind of okay? Somewhat? All right, try 7. This will probably be the last one we have time for. Can I make this a little bit? Did you catch up? Okay, I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger so we can see. My eyes are old. I can't see that little stuff. Be careful with this one. We talked about the negatives yesterday, whether they were inside a parenthesis versus outside the parenthesis, whether we take them with us as we go or not. Be very careful with this, like we discussed yesterday. Our parentheses in the same, do they go with us or do they wait till the end? Depends on if they are in the parentheses or not. First question. With that top part, I need to get rid of those parentheses. Is that negative going to be cubed with my 2 or save it till the end? Cubed with the 2 because it is in the parentheses, yes. Okay, it's inside the parentheses. That means it's going to be cubed with the 2. So it's going to look like this. Okay, now I'm giving this exponent to the x and to the y as well. But at the bottom, where is my negative? Inside or outside? Outside. So really what this says is this says -1 times this stuff, okay? Exponents happen before multiplying. So when we square everything, we're squaring just the 6, the x, and the z, and that negative is going to stay afterwards. If that makes any sense. Okay, exponents come before multiplying because that negative at the bottom was outside. It is not included in that square. If I had put it inside, then we would have put it in the square. Is that kind of okay so far? Somewhat. All right, let me ask you a question. If I do -2 to the third, -2 times -2 times -2 gives me -8. Okay, I'm leaving the x to the third and the y to the 6th for now. And what I want to talk about is this, because I keep having the same question, and it's a good idea. However, we're just not recognizing. How many terms is this inside here? It's one term. Remember, terms are separated by plus and minus signs, like a binomial and a trinomial. That's 2 terms and 3 terms. This is 3 parts being multiplied, but it's just one term. Okay? So when we multiply this, it's not really distributing a negative. I wouldn't give it to the 6, to the x, and to the z. They're all the same thing. So what I need to do is I need to figure this out inside. What is 6 squared? Okay. And then the x squared and the z to the 6 is going to stay. But if I just take that and multiply it by -1, it just becomes just a negative 36x. Sorry, stuff's not right. X squared z to the 6. Does that make a little bit of sense? Why the negative is still there with that 36? Yeah, but I have to, so let me do it like this. If I did 6xz to the 3rd twice, think about it like that. Oops. 6 times 6 is 36, right? X times x would give you x what? How many x's? 2, right? Z to the 3rd times z to the 3rd is how many z's? How many z's is it?
3.
No. Which is 6. So that's why I get that. Okay, you're multiplying your exponents, not adding them at that point. Okay. All right. You got it? All right. So let's think about this. First of all, if I have a negative over a negative, what does that reduce to be? Negative divided by negative always turns positive. Okay. And then 8 and 36, what do they have in common? So that's going to turn into a 2, and that's going to turn into a 9. Do I have x's at the top or the bottom? Yes. Where do I have more, at the top or the bottom? How many more? 1. Okay. Then I'm looking at the y's. I have 6 y's at the top. Do I have any at the bottom? No. So there's nothing to reduce that with. So that y to the 6th is going to stay where it is. What am I missing? The z's. Do I have any z's at the top to reduce? So that z to the 6th is going to stay in the bottom. And so my final reduced answer there